"You're marrying Sebastian Thorne in 2 weeks," my father said, and I felt my entire world tilt sideways. Sebastian Thorne? The billionaire who had driven away 7 personal assistants? The man so ruthless they said he had a calculator for a heart instead of feelings. And me? I was the scarred, unwanted daughter they were throwing at him like a sacrificial lamb to save their dying company. I just sat there, frozen in our living room, trying to process what he just said. My brain was screaming at me to say something, anything, but my mouth wouldn't work. It was like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed all the air out of my lungs. "Did you hear me, Eleanor?" My father's voice cut through the fog. He was sitting across from me, back straight, hands folded on his knees, like he was discussing a stock portfolio instead of selling off his daughter. "I heard you," I managed to whisper. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Around the room, my family watched me like I was some kind of exhibit. My mother, Victoria, stood by the window with her wineglass, not even pretending to look at me. My older sister, Charlotte, was leaning against the wall, and I could see the pity in her eyes. That was almost worse than the disgust on my younger brother Leo's face. "Good," my father said, smoothing down his tie. "Then we can move forward with the arrangements." Move forward like this was already decided, like I was just a piece on a chessboard they were pushing around. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but what was the point? I'd learned a long time ago that wanting things didn't matter in this house. Not for me, anyway. "Sebastian Thorne," I said slowly, testing the name on my tongue. It tasted bitter. "The same Sebastian Thorne who's had 7 failed partnerships?" 8, actually. Leo corrected from his spot on the couch, not even looking up from his phone. But who's counting? 8. 8 associates who'd thought they could handle him. 8 people who'd walked into his life and walked out broken. Their bank accounts fuller, but their spirits crushed. And now I was supposed to be number 9. "He knows," my father said quickly, like he could read the question forming in my mind. "About your condition. We sent him photographs. He's aware of everything." My condition. That's what he called it. Like my scars were some kind of disease instead of proof that I'd saved her precious golden child. And he still agreed? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. Why? My mother finally turned from the window. Her face was tired, lined with stress I knew had nothing to do with concern for me. "Does it matter? He's willing to marry you, and in exchange, he's investing in the company. Everyone wins." Everyone wins, right? Everyone except me. What if I say no? The words came out before I could stop them. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. My father's expression hardened into something cold and distant. "Then we lose the company, Eleanor. Your siblings lose their inheritance. Everything our family has built for generations. Gone. Is that what you want?" No, of course not. But I didn't want this either. "You've already taken so much from this family," my mother added, her voice quiet but sharp as broken glass. "The medical bills from the accident, the therapy, the modifications we made to the house so you could hide in the south wing, the social events we've had to decline because we couldn't explain why our middle daughter never appears in public." Each word landed like a punch. They'd been keeping score this whole time, tallying up exactly how much I'd cost them, and now it was time to pay up. "I didn't ask for any of that," I said, but my voice was weak. "No," my father agreed, "but you got it anyway. And now we're asking something of you in return." Asking. As if I had a choice, as if this wasn't them backing me into a corner with no way out. I looked at Charlotte, the sister I'd saved, the one who should have scars instead of me. She shifted uncomfortably, her perfect face twisted with something that might have been guilt. "Maybe it won't be so bad, Ellie. Maybe Sebastian's just misunderstood." You know how rumors are. Misunderstood. Sure, 8 failed partnerships were just rumors. The stories about his cold demeanor, his impossible standards, his complete inability to feel anything resembling warmth, all just misunderstandings. I wanted to laugh, but I was afraid if I started, I might never stop. He's sending a car for you next Friday, my mother continued, pulling out her phone to check her calendar like this was just another appointment. You'll move into his estate immediately. The wedding will be the following Saturday. Small ceremony, just immediate family.
1 week to pack up my life. 1 week before I became Mrs. Sebastian Thorne. 1 week before I'd traded one prison for another. Can I at least meet him first? I asked. Before the wedding? My mother waved her hand dismissively. He's a very busy man, Eleanor. Besides, what difference would it make? The contracts are already signed. Of course they were. Why would anyone bother consulting me about my own life? Leo snorted from the couch. Look on the bright side, sis. At least you'll finally be useful for something. The words hit exactly where he meant them to. All these years, I'd been nothing but a burden. The damaged daughter who couldn't even socialize properly, whose confidence was probably ruined along with everything else. The one they had to hide because my face was too horrifying for polite society. And now? Now I was a bargaining chip, a transaction, a problem being solved. Try to make yourself presentable, my father added as he stood, signaling that this conversation was over. Wear something that covers, well, you know. And for God's sake, try to smile when you meet him. We need this to work, Eleanor. We need this to work. Not, I hope you'll be happy. Not, we want what's best for you. Just, we need this to work. I nodded because what else could I do? I stood up on shaking legs and walked toward the door, feeling their eyes on my back like weights. Eleanor, my father called out just as I reached the doorway. I turned, and for a split second, I thought maybe he was going to say something kind, something fatherly. Don't disappoint us. Climb the stairs to my room in the south wing, the part of the house they'd renovated after the accident, my private cage. These walls had been my whole world for 6 years, and in 1 week, I'd be leaving them for something potentially worse. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and stopped. The scars looked particularly ugly today, raised and shiny under the lights. My auburn hair needed cutting. My green eyes, the only part of me that hadn't been touched by the glass, looked hollow, haunted. This was what Sebastian Thorne was getting. This was what he had agreed to marry, a broken, scarred woman that nobody else wanted. Inside my room, I closed the door and slid down to sit on the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest and let my head fall forward. I didn't cry. I'd learned years ago that crying didn't change anything. But I felt it. That deep ache in my chest that came from knowing you were completely and utterly alone. They said Sebastian Thorne had a calculator for a heart. Maybe that made us perfect for each other because I'm pretty sure my heart had frozen over the day I realized my family would never forgive me for surviving. The week passed in a blur of preparations that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with appearances. I spent most of that week in my room, packing up a life that had barely been lived. Eleanor, soft knock on my door. Charlotte's voice. I almost didn't answer, but old habits died hard, and I'd spent a lifetime being the accommodating one. Come in. She entered slowly, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. In her hands was a small box wrapped in plain paper. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. I wanted to give you this before you left, she said, holding out the box. It's not much, and opened it to find a simple silver necklace. Elegant, expensive, exactly the kind of thing Charlotte would choose. She paused, searching for words, between all of us. But you're still my sister, Ellie, and what you did for me that night, don't. I cut her off, my voice sharper than intended. Please don't. Because if she thanks me, if she acknowledged what I'd given up for her, I might actually break. And I couldn't afford to break.
Not now. Not when I needed every bit of strength just to survive the next phase of my life. Charlotte's face fell. I'm sorry for everything, for how they treat you, for not standing up for you more. I'm a coward, and I know it. At least she was honest. You should go, I said quietly, setting the necklace on my dresser. I have more packing to do. She lingered for a moment longer, then nodded and left. I picked up the necklace, feeling its weight in my palm. It was a kind gesture, probably the only one I'd get from this family. But kindness without action was just guilt wearing a different face. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sebastian Thorne. I'd done what any sane person would do. I'd searched for him online. There were plenty of articles, business, acquisitions, real estate deals, charity galas, where he stood at the edge of photos, always alone, always distant. And there were the partnership announcements. What kind of person went through 8 partnerships and never made it to the altar? What was so wrong with him that no one could stand to stay? Well, I guess I was about to find out. Tomorrow, I'd leave this house and whatever remained of my old life behind. And honestly, I didn't know if I was terrified or relieved. Maybe both. The next morning, I stood at the window watching a black car pull up the driveway. Sleek and expensive and completely out of place in front of our house. The driver stepped out, older man, professional, the kind who'd seen everything and judged nothing. "Your ride's here," Leo called from downstairs, his voice dripping with fake cheerfulness. "Don't keep your new husband waiting." I grabbed my suitcase and headed out. My mother was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She straightened my collar with brisk, efficient movements, her touch clinical. "Remember what we discussed. Be pleasant, be grateful, don't make trouble." "Goodbye to you too, Mom," I muttered. She didn't even flinch at the sarcasm, just patted my shoulder once and stepped back. My father had already left for work. Charlotte was nowhere to be seen. Only Leo bothered to watch me leave, and that was probably just for entertainment. The driver took my suitcase without a word and opened the back door. I slid inside. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. The drive took 40 minutes. We left the city behind, winding through countryside I'd only seen in pictures. Trees lined the roads, their leaves turning gold and red. It would have been beautiful if I wasn't on my way to my own execution. Then we turned through iron gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress. The estate that spread out before me was massive. The main house was all modern glass and stone, sprawling across perfectly manicured grounds. There were gardens, a fountain, what looked like a separate guest house in the distance. This was where Sebastian Thorne lived alone in all this space. The loneliness of it hit me before I even got out of the car. The driver opened my door. "Mr. Thorne is waiting in his study. Martin will show you in." Martin turned out to be a butler. He was middle-aged, kind-faced, and if he noticed my scars, he didn't react. "Welcome, Miss Croft," he said warmly. "Please follow me." The inside of the house was just as impressive as the outside. High ceilings, expensive art, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. We walked down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever, and with each step, my heart beat faster. I was about to meet him, the ruthless billionaire, the man I was supposed to marry in 1 week. Martin stopped at a large wooden door and knocked twice. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Croft has arrived?" "Send her in," came a deep voice from inside. Martin opened the door and gestured me forward. I stepped inside and the door clicked shut behind me. The study was all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it, standing with his back to me, was Sebastian Thorne. He was tall, taller than I had imagined, broad shoulders, dark hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than a car. He was looking out the window at his estate, and he didn't turn around immediately. The silence stretched. My palms were sweating. Finally, he turned to face me, and my breath caught in my throat. Sebastian Thorne wasn't handsome in the traditional sense. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, like someone had carved him from stone. Gray eyes that looked right through you. But there was something about him, a presence, a weight that filled the entire room. Those gray eyes fixed on me, traveling slowly over my face, taking in the scars, the damage, everything I usually tried to hide. I waited for disgust, for disappointment, for that moment when he'd realize what a terrible deal he had made. Instead, he just studied me for a long moment. Then he spoke. "You look younger than I expected." And they didn't mention the green eyes. I didn't know what to say to that. Was it a compliment, an observation? His tone gave nothing away. He moved around the desk until he was standing just a few feet from me. This close, I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, richer. "I'm Sebastian," he said, extending his hand. "But you already knew that." I took his hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Eleanor," I managed, "though you probably knew that too." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Your family was very thorough in their proposal," he said, releasing my hand and stepping back. "They made it clear this arrangement benefits them significantly." "Yeah, well," I said, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice, "they're good at that." He tilted his head slightly, studying me again with those unreadable gray eyes. "And what do you get out of this, Eleanor?" The question caught me off guard. Nobody had asked me that. Not once. "I get to leave," I said, honestly. "That's something." Something shifted in his expression, so brief I almost missed it. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "Then we have that in common," Sebastian said quietly. "We're both looking for escape." Before I could process what he meant, he turned back to his desk. "Martin will show you to your room. We'll have dinner tonight at 7. We should discuss the terms of our arrangement before the wedding." Terms. Arrangement. Like this was a business deal instead of a marriage. Maybe that's exactly what it was. "Okay then," I said, because what else was there to say? I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me at the door. "Eleanor." I looked back. Those cold gray eyes met mine. "Welcome home," Sebastian said, and somehow those two words terrified me more than anything else. My room was bigger than my entire space back home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, a massive bed, an ensuite bathroom with a tub I could actually stretch out in. Everything was pristine, elegant, and completely impersonal, like a very expensive hotel room. I unpacked my single suitcase, and my belongings looked pathetic, scattered across the dresser. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Croft? Dinner will be served in 10 minutes. Right. Dinner with my future husband, the man who'd looked at me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. I changed into something slightly more presentable and made my way downstairs, following the sound of clinking dishes. The dining room was ridiculous. A table that could seat 20, set for 2 at one end. Sebastian was already there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking at his phone. He glanced up when I entered. "Sit." I sat across from him, and immediately a staff member appeared with food. Expensive food. The kind I'd only seen at fancy restaurants my family attended, without me. "You don't have to be nervous," Sebastian said, setting his phone aside. "I don't bite." "Could have fooled me," I muttered before I could stop myself. He actually smiled. "Your family led me to believe you were compliant, quiet." "Yeah, well, my family says a lot of things. I'm starting to notice that." He took a sip of wine, watching me over the rim of his glass. "Tell me about the accident." My hand froze halfway to my fork. "What?" "The accident that gave you those scars. Your family mentioned it, but not the details." "Why do you want to know?" "Because in 1 week, you'll be my wife. I'd like to know who I'm marrying." "Fair enough, I guess." I took a breath. "There was a party at our house. A car accident on the way home. I was driving. Charlotte was in the passenger seat. A drunk driver ran a red light. I swerved to take the main impact on my side. I got her out, barely. The car, it was bad. I spent 3 months in the hospital, another year in physical therapy. The scars are what they are." He was quiet for a moment. "Your family treats you like you're the problem, but you saved your sister's life."
Yeah, well, I pushed food around my plate. Gratitude has an expiration date, apparently. It shouldn't. The way he said it, flat, matter-of-fact, almost angry, made me look up. His jaw was tight, eyes dark with something I couldn't quite read. "Why did you agree to this?" I asked suddenly. "To marry me. You could have anyone. Why say yes to this?" He set down his fork carefully. "Because your family was desperate, which meant they'd agree to my terms, and because everyone else who's come into my life has wanted something from me. Money, status, connections. You're the first person who clearly wants nothing to do with me at all." I blinked. "That's a weird reason to get married." "Is it?" He leaned back in his chair. "At least it's honest. You don't want to be here. I don't particularly want company. We both get something out of this arrangement. No false pretenses. And when you get bored of me, like the other 8, something sharp flashed across his face. "I was never partnered with 8 people, Eleanor. It was 4. The gossip added 4 more for entertainment. And they left because I gave them what they wanted, money and freedom. None of them wanted to actually stay. Did you want them to?" "No," he said simply. "I didn't." The honesty was startling. Most people would have lied, would have made themselves look better. Sebastian just didn't. "So, what happens now? We get married, live in this enormous house, and just exist separately?" "That was the plan." He paused. "Unless you want something different." Did I? I didn't even know. A week ago, I'd been locked in my room, invisible. Now I was sitting across from a stranger who'd soon be my husband, having the most bizarre conversation of my life. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "Then we'll figure it out as we go." Sebastian stood, signaling the end of dinner. "Your room has everything you need. If it doesn't, tell Martin. The estate is yours to explore. I work from home most days, so you'll see me around." He started to leave, then stopped, turned back. "For what it's worth, I don't think your scars make you less of anything. They make you someone who survived. That's more than most people can say." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in that massive dining room, my heart doing something strange in my chest. Sebastian Thorne wasn't what I expected. He was cold, yes, distant, but there was something underneath that ice, something that almost felt like understanding. I touched my scars without thinking. For the first time in 6 years, someone had looked at them and seen survival instead of damage. Maybe this wouldn't be as terrible as I thought. Or maybe that's exactly what the other 4 had believed, right before everything fell apart. The wedding happened on a Saturday that felt more like signing paperwork than making vows. 15 minutes. That's all it took to become Mrs. Sebastian Thorne. A judge, our families, a few words, and it was done. Sebastian didn't kiss me, just nodded once, formal and distant, like we'd just closed a business deal, which I guess we had. My family left immediately after.
My mother reminded me to be good, whatever that meant. Charlotte looked guilty. Leo looked relieved to see me go. And just like that, I was alone in this massive estate with a man I barely knew, a man who was now my husband. "Your things have been moved to the south wing," Sebastian said that first night, hands in his pockets, keeping careful distance between us. "You have your own space, your own bathroom, privacy. And you, north wing? Opposite side of the house, of course. Maximum distance." That was the arrangement, wasn't it? He continued like he was outlining a work schedule. "We'll have dinner together each evening at 7. Maintain appearances for staff. Beyond that, your time is your own. The estate, the library, the gardens, everything is available to you." "Okay," I responded softly. "If you need anything, ask Martin. He manages the household." Sebastian paused at the doorway. "This doesn't have to be difficult, Eleanor. We both know what this is."
A transaction, an arrangement, two people existing in the same space but living separate lives. The first week was exactly that. I'd wake up, and Sebastian would already be in his study. I'd explore the estate, the massive library, the gardens that went on forever, rooms I didn't even have names for. Everything was beautiful and cold and empty. Dinner at 7 became our only real interaction. We'd sit at that enormous table, eat food I couldn't pronounce, and make careful conversation about nothing important. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Yours?" "Productive." And that was it. Like strangers sharing an elevator, counting down the floors until we could escape. But there were moments. By the 4th week, small things I started noticing. The way Sebastian's jaw would tighten when I mentioned my family. How he'd pause sometimes like he wanted to say something more but couldn't. The books that would appear in my room, ones I'd mentioned liking, just casually showing up on my nightstand. He was paying attention. Even from across the house behind his walls, he was paying attention. By the 6th week, the silence started feeling less like peace and more like loneliness. I caught myself listening for his footsteps, wondering what he was doing in that study all day, why someone with this much space and money chose to live like a ghost in his own home. One night at dinner, I broke the script. "Why do you work so much?" Sebastian looked up, surprised. "I have responsibilities." "You have people for that. Staff, employees. You could delegate." I could. But then what would I do? The question hung there heavy with meaning. What would he do if he weren't working, if he wasn't filling every moment with productivity to avoid feeling anything? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Live." "Maybe I am living." "Are you?" His eyes met mine, and for a second, something cracked in that perfect composure, something raw and hurt and quickly hidden. "Are you?" he shot back quietly. "Touché. We were both ghosts, weren't we? Him in his north wing, me in my south, both of us just existing, going through the motions, pretending this was enough. This isn't what I thought marriage would be," I admitted. "What did you think it would be?" "I don't know. More something. Not this silent arrangement where we're polite strangers." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. "Would you prefer something different?" "I don't know what I'd prefer, but this," I gestured between us, "this feels like we're both just waiting for something that's never going to happen." "Maybe that's safer." "Safer than what? Than trying and failing again?" There it was, a glimpse behind the ice, and it looked exhausted. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying that conversation,
the tired way he'd said, again, like he'd been failing at something for so long he'd forgotten how to try. Around midnight, I gave up and wandered downstairs for water. That's when I heard it. A sound coming from Sebastian's study. Broken. Painful. I moved closer, and through the crack in the door, I saw him. Sebastian Thorne, the ruthless billionaire, my distant husband, sitting at his desk with his head in his hands, crying. Not quiet tears, real, devastating sobs that shook his shoulders. In front of him was a photograph I'd never seen before, a woman with kind eyes and his sharp features. "I'm sorry," he was whispering to the picture. "I tried, Dad. I tried so hard, but I can't feel anymore. I can't. I don't know how." His voice shattered completely, and so did my chest.
This was what lived behind the ice. This was what he'd been hiding. Not coldness, not cruelty, just unbearable, suffocating grief. I stepped back silently, my heart pounding. I shouldn't have seen that, shouldn't have witnessed him breaking apart. But I couldn't unsee it now, and suddenly, our silent arrangement, our careful distance, our separate wings, it all made terrible, heartbreaking sense. Sebastian wasn't cold. He was drowning in grief. The next morning at breakfast, Sebastian was perfectly composed. Suit crisp, expression neutral, asking me how I slept as if nothing had happened. "Fine," I lied. "You?" "Well enough." We were both liars, apparently, but something had shifted. I couldn't look at him the same way, couldn't see the ice anymore without wondering what was underneath it. That afternoon, I did something probably stupid. I went looking for Martin. The photograph in Mr. Thorne's study. The man. Who is he? Martin's expression softened with sadness. His father, Arthur. He passed 8 years ago. How? Heart attack. It was very sudden. Mr. Thorne was very close to him. After he died, Martin paused, choosing his words. Changed, became more withdrawn. His mother had already passed. He was all he had left. 8 years. 8 years of Sebastian trying to fill the emptiness with partnerships that never stuck, with distance that kept everyone away. The others, the people he was partnered with, why did they really leave? Martin sighed. Because Mr. Thorne wouldn't let them in. He'd agreed to marry them, give them everything they wanted materially, but never himself. Eventually, they realized he was never going to love them, so they took the money and left. Did he want them to stay? I don't think he knew how to want anything anymore, Miss Croft. I found Sebastian in his study that evening, before dinner. He looked up surprised. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "Why did your father's death change you?" His entire body went rigid. "Excuse me?" "Martin told me about him, about what happened after." Martin talks too much. His voice was ice again, walls slamming up. "Maybe," I said, stepping further into the room. "But I need to understand." "Understand what?" He stood abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. "That I'm broken? That everyone who gets close to me eventually realizes I have nothing to give? Is that what you want to hear, Eleanor?" "I want to hear the truth." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is, my father was the only person who ever loved me without wanting something in return. When he died, he took that part of me with him, the part that knows how to feel, how to connect. I've tried, Eleanor. God, I've tried, but there's nothing left. Just
He gestured at himself helplessly. Empty. The pain in his voice cut right through me. You're not empty, I said quietly. You don't know me. Maybe not, but empty people don't cry over photographs at midnight. They don't welcome strangers into their homes and tell them they survived. Empty people don't... I swallowed hard. Don't look at someone's scars and see strength. Sebastian stared at me as if I'd slapped him. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us knew how to say. Why do you care? He finally whispered. Because maybe we're both less broken than we think, and maybe that's terrifying. His gray eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw past the ice completely. What I found there wasn't cold at all, and that was all the initiative I needed to get closer to him. So, one morning at breakfast, I stirred the conversation a little deeper. Did you sleep? I asked. He glanced up, surprised by the question. Enough. You? Not really. I hesitated, then pushed forward. I was thinking, maybe we could have breakfast together too. Not just dinner, if you want. Something flickered across his face. Confusion, maybe, or hope. You don't have to do that. I know, but sitting alone in that massive dining room feels ridiculous. Might as well be ridiculous together. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. All right, tomorrow, 7 a.m. It was a small thing, but it was something. Over the next few days, breakfast became our new routine. Then Sebastian started showing me around the estate properly, not just the public spaces, but his favorite spots. A greenhouse I hadn't found, filled with plants his father used to grow. A bench overlooking the lake where he'd go to think. I used to come here after my dad died, he admitted one afternoon, staring out at the water. Just sit for hours, trying to feel something other than empty. Did it work? No. He looked at me, then really looked. Not until recently. My breath caught. Sebastian, I'm not good at this, he interrupted, jaw tight, at letting people in. Every time I try, I fail. They leave or I push them away, and it just confirms that I'm stopped, struggling, that I'm broken, beyond fixing. You're not broken, I said firmly. You don't know that. Maybe not, but you looked at my scars and saw survival. Maybe I can do the same for you. I stepped closer. Maybe we both just need someone who understands what it's like to feel damaged. His gray eyes searched mine, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. I don't want to hurt you, Eleanor. Then don't push me away. I don't know if I can do anything else. Then we'll figure it out together. For a moment, I thought he might actually let me in, might say something real and honest and trust that I wouldn't break it. Instead, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted. Cold, distant, walls slamming back up. I need to take this. Business. He walked away and I stood there, alone, feeling like I'd just lost something I'd barely started to hold. That night, Sebastian didn't come to dinner, or the next morning's breakfast. For 3 days, he disappeared into work, barely leaving his study. When I'd knock, he'd say he was busy. When I'd try to wait, Martin would gently suggest Mr. Thorne preferred not to be disturbed. The message was clear. I'd gotten too close, and he was retreating. It hurt more than I expected, more than it should for an arranged marriage that was supposed to be nothing but convenience. On the 4th day, I'd had enough. I'd spent 6 years hiding from my own family, making myself small, accepting that I wasn't worth their time or love. I'd married Sebastian, thinking I'd do the same thing here. Exist quietly, take up minimal space, expect Nothing. But I was tired of being invisible. So I knocked on his study door and didn't wait for permission before walking in. Sebastian looked up, startled. Eleanor, I'm in the middle of...
I don't care, I said, closing the door behind me. You've been avoiding me for 3 days. I've been working. You've been hiding. There's a difference. I crossed my arms. What happened? We were actually talking, actually connecting, and then you just disappeared. I told you. Business. Stop lying. My voice came out harder than intended. I'm not one of your employees, Sebastian. I'm your wife. And maybe this marriage is just an arrangement. Maybe we're both here for the wrong reasons. But I deserve better than being shut out every time you get scared. His jaw tightened. I'm not scared. Yes, you are. You're terrified of feeling something, of letting anyone in, of failing again. I stepped closer to his desk. But guess what? I'm terrified too, of being unwanted, of not being enough, of living the rest of my life as someone's burden. So if we're going to be scared, can we at least be scared together instead of in separate wings of this massive, lonely house? Sebastian stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. I saw you, I said quietly. That night, crying in here, talking to your father's photograph, I saw you breaking, Sebastian, and I'm still here. His composure cracked completely. He stood abruptly, hands gripping the edge of his desk. You shouldn't have seen that. But I did, and it didn't make me think less of you. It made me realize you're not the ruthless billionaire everyone says you are. You're just someone who lost the person who loved him most and forgot how to let anyone else in. Eleanor, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to stop running away. Stop hiding. We're already married. We're already stuck with each other. Can we at least try to be honest? Silence. Heavy and suffocating. Then Sebastian did something unexpected. He laughed. Short, bitter, broken. You're braver than I am. What? You walked out of a family that treated you like garbage. You survived an accident and scars and years of being told you weren't enough. And here you are, calling me out, demanding honesty? I can barely admit to myself that I'm lonely, and you're standing here asking me to be vulnerable. Is that a yes or a no? He looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, carefully, he said, You intrigue me, Eleanor. So much that I wonder what you do all day. Whether you're adjusting, whether you're happy, whether those books I leave in your room are ones you actually like, or if I'm completely missing the mark. My heart stuttered. You leave those books? Yeah, his voice was raw. I pay attention to everything about you. How you touch your scars when you're nervous. The way your eyes light up when you talk about something you care about. And it terrifies me because every time I've cared, I've lost. So yes, I'm running because caring about you feels dangerous. My breath caught as I stared at him in awe. What if you didn't run? What if I hurt you anyway? What if you don't? We stood there, separated by his desk, and years of pain and fear, both of us trembling on the edge of something we were trying to make sense of. Then Sebastian walked around the desk, stood right in front of me, and very carefully, like I might break, he reached up and traced one finger along my scarred jaw. You drive a hard bargain, Eleanor, he said quietly, as he pressed a kiss to my forehead. I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch, and for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel like someone's shame. I felt seen. Things shifted after that night in Sebastian's study. Not dramatically, not like some romantic movie where everything suddenly became perfect, but slowly, carefully,
like two broken people learning to trust that the ground beneath them wouldn't collapse.